Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to Government Contracting Weekly. I'm Jim McCarthy, the owner of Key Solutions and the host of this show. All of us are in the process of wrapping up 2014, but before we do, this morning we want to bring you our third annual retrospective that we call 2014, a year in review. Among the many questions that we will be probing today is whether this past year, in a period of post-sequestration and government shutdown, is in fact the new normal, or whether we have turned the corner on the way to a new period of prosperity. Joining me today are three guests to discuss this and other broad-ranging questions. And these three outstanding panelists who bring us a great overview and diversity of perspectives. First, I'd like to welcome back to Government Contracting Weekly, Stan Soloway, the President and CEO of Professional Services Council. Good morning, Stan.
Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. Glad
Always
you're back.
nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. Next, we're joined by Ann Rung, who was recently named by President Obama as the Administrator for the Office of Federal Procurement Policy at the Office of the Management and Budget. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning.
Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you very
Congratulations on being on the show.
Thank
We're glad
you.
to have you. And last but not least is Will Goodman, who is the Assistant Vice President for Policy at the National Defense Industrial Association. Good morning to you, Will.
Very glad to be here.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay. So, look, we have a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. And first question will be for you, Stan, which is, if you had to identify what you regard as the most impactful development in government contracting for the year 2014, what would you say?
I think I'd say is that we look back at the year, we had confirmed for us something we had believed for a while, which is the market is much more stable than a lot of people think it is. In many ways, the biggest question for the market is not market volume, but market quality. Okay. And if you look particularly on the civilian side of the ledger, the use of the government contract pace, amount, the high-end kinds of focuses that civilian agencies have continued pretty consistently all year long, even despite the 16-day shutdown. And so to me, as I look at the most important factor that I see is pretty solid proof of a stability in the marketplace. A
stable market.
Yeah.
Ann, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's heartening to hear from Stan. I would say that we've been moving forward on the pillars of the President's management agenda, which is focused on effectiveness, efficiency, and people and culture and growing the market. And in effectiveness, we've been really thinking hard about how to be smarter about IT delivery. And we've really been thinking about how do we revamp and kind of ensure that we're delivering these valuable services in the best way possible. And we've done two things that I think are going to have a significant impact on how we buy and manage these services, and that's the development of the Digital Services Playbook, which is comprised of 13 best plays in the private and public sector and how you deliver these services. And then the TechFAR, which is a handbook that the agencies can use that show them that there's existing regulations that allow them to deliver on these plays.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like under your leadership there's going to be an instant impact under the new guidance and so on from you.
There's a lot of great things already underway, so we want to continue that momentum.
Okay, Will, your association watches everything here in Washington. What would you think is the most impactful event in the year?
Yeah, I think the fact that we had partial sequester relief and the uncertainty leading into the coming fiscal year. I think there is stability, but there's still a great concern and a big question mark about what our top line is going to be. And without having a confirmed top line, really it's very difficult to make programmatic projections, which means every company's out there wondering what the future might be, whether we're going to have a return to full sequester, whether we'll have full relief, or something in between the two.
When I was listening to Will, I want to be clear, I absolutely agree with you. I didn't mean to suggest that all was good. What I was talking about was in terms of actual spend rates and the robustness of the marketplace. The market continues to outperform the budget by very significant amounts. Will's point is absolutely critical, and it's particularly an issue within the Defense Department, where there are continuing debates battles over funding and mission focus. You have a president's budget that's heavily focused on things like base realignment and closure and military pay and benefits, neither of which is taking place, so that puts other pressures on the budget. On the civilian side, we saw a lot more stability and continuity of spend. So I think Will's absolutely right, and I think that as we looked at the year, you could see the Defense Department kind of in fits and starts doing what they were going to do. But overall, the sky didn't fall, and I think that's part of the key point, and that's particularly true, again, on the civilian side, where they have a much clearer sense of mission. And I think it's the mission adjustments that actually is where DOD is kind of being buffeted because they don't know where the funding is going to go.
So is it just anecdotal that it's been said that a lot of small businesses, probably members of your respective associations, who had a tough time during these periods, you know, because of the uncertainty of the procurement forecasts and so on?
There's tremendous uncertainty, and I think Will's point about agencies being able to plan and execute against program plans is hugely impacted by budget instability. So there's kind of multiple levels to this when I talk about stability. So there's fits and starts in some cases. You also have a market that is dramatically changed from where it was 10 or 15 years ago. It's a volume market now in the professional services and technology space. It's not big one-off contracts. Right. And when it's a volume market, that just increases the competitive pressures all the way down through the industrial base, and that puts a lot of different segments of the market under new pressures and continued pressures. But clearly, executing against a plan is almost impossible at DOD these days because of the budget.
And I'll just emphasize that point from the government acquisition workforce perspective. You know, planning is the key to ensuring the acquisition success, and the budget uncertainty certainly does hinder that.
Yes. Well, you know, it occurs to me there's a lot of measures of what could be of success, I guess, and the dollar amounts and the budget amounts are one thing. But in this town, there are a lot of people who make their living as contracting officers or as capture managers or as proposal managers, as BD people or whatever like that. And in order for them to have work, there has to be RFPs. And yet it appears that the number of RFPs has dropped more than the budget proportionally. Is that consistent with you all's perspective? Yeah.
I'll jump in on that. I mean, I think our early numbers for FY14 are showing that spending is going to be down this year in federal contracting, which I think is continuing a 2-year trend. But there's still significant procurement activity. There's hundreds of billions of dollars that we spend in this space. And I think the key here for us is ensuring that we have really robust competition, right? So that good companies can continue to compete in the marketplace, that they're delivering the best, most innovative solutions. So I'd argue it's not just the number of RFPs, but really the quality of proposals that you're getting as well.
Well, I think also one other thing, it's not only the quality, it's also mission focused. So you can see segments of the market which are clearly coming down. Other segments actually are coming up. And so I think you could we have done some work to try to tie mission priority to where the spend is. And we're seeing that continue apace. So in many ways, the professional services and technology sectors are a human capital pool for the government. And where there's mission priority, the spend is continuing.
Spend is continuing. Okay, well, we're going to step away for a brief break, but Will, when we come back, I want to ask you a little bit about whether or not there is, in fact, a new normal, or whether or not we've turned the corner and we're back on the road to prosperity, to the good old days, okay? We'll be right back.
So, did we win that government contract?
We did. And now we've got to deal with the regulatory hurdles.
Well, good luck with that.
When the government's your client, you need to play by their rules.
And the rules change more than you think.
Exactly. We need someone who's done this before. Plus, it's complicated, so we're going with BDO.
BDO?
People who know government contracting know BDO.
Working in contract management is a complex job. Creating, executing, managing contracts. It's an ever-changing world, and our members share the same challenges. At the National Contract Management Association, we know this business, gathering the best minds in our field, furthering your career by providing knowledge and training. Together, we've figured it out.
Welcome back. Will, from the NDIA perspective, is there a new normal in the GovCon marketplace, or have we turned the corner and back to the heady days of yesteryear?
Well, I don't mean to take issue with the question, but I think, you know, to say, is it a new normal, is it an old normal, there's constant change in this market, and companies certainly have adjusted to what they think is going to be downward-facing, you know, budget prospects in the future, and they become much more efficient and leaner, more competitive, and so that certainly is probably a feature of the market in the future, I would say. I think I can speak for all three of us in saying I certainly hope the political instability and budget instability is not a new normal, and it seems like there may be an opportunity to make corrections in that area in the future. So I think, you know, what we see in the industry, on the industry side, is probably going to persist, the new competitiveness, but hopefully we'll see some correction back to times past in terms of political regular order on the Hill and so forth.
But we won't, but going back to the heady days, if you will, of 07, 08, 06, that period, that was a unique period. We were fighting two wars, and sizable portions of the spend were going to support the two conflicts. Getting back to that kind of environment, first of all, nobody wants to be in two wars again, but getting back to that kind of level of spend is unlikely. The question is, when, as Will said, when does it level out? When does the predictability of the market return? Because that's what the market really needs, the companies really need.
The ability to plan, and that takes a predictable sort of regimen.
I mean, I think our workforce and industry has shown that even in really difficult times like shutdown and sequestration, that they're incredibly resilient and adaptive, but that's not the environment that we want them to become used to, right? And so for us, we want the new normal to be, we're as efficient as possible, we're driving, you know, great performance, we're innovative. That's the new normal that we want.
That you want.
But to your, back also to your question, Jim, the new normal being the instability, I'm afraid it's with us for at least another year or two.
Because of the pending election and so on, yeah. Okay, Ann, from your new post now as head of OFPP, how do you characterize the state of the union of the government contracting market?
It's a pretty lofty question.
Yes, it is. Well, from your perch, if you would look down.
Okay, yeah, I would say, well, first of all, I bring both a state procurement perspective and a federal government perspective. And it's funny how similar it is in many ways. So I would say that I'm always heartened by the talent and the dedication of the people in this space, and I'm talking about the government people and the industry people. They really care and they want to do the right thing. I would say that the things that I find consistently across state government and federal government is, and I hear this from industry, is the sheer complexity of this space, right? And so it's statements of work that are too long, too overly prescriptive, too government specific. I hear they've got to navigate through thousands of different contracting offices across government, that there's no sharing of information. This kind of complexity really hinders innovation. It makes us less efficient. It hurts us cost-wise.
And you probably plan to fix that by the end of the month, right?
I'll have that done probably by the end of this show. Okay, I've got people working on it right now.
Stan, if I said to you that many of the companies and the contractors are still in a, quote, funk, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and now why?
Well, I think that the part of it is the complete unpredictability. Yeah. There are a number of, and we don't have time to get into all the details, but there are a number of different behaviors emerging in different agencies, some of them across government, some of them agency specific, that are hard to understand, whether it's how they allocate contracts and as Ann said, the statements of work that don't match what the customer really wants, and so forth. So when I said at the beginning that we're really in a market of, there's a lot of money out there, but the quality of the market, when I say quality, it's not just about margins, it's really about, can I bring innovation and can I really deliver something and can I bring something different to the table? And we find that very, very difficult to do. And I think that we're at an inflection point. We've got a commercial world, a broader economy that is going through massive change driven by technology. We have a complete generational change taking place in the acquisition community. We are about to have a complete generational change in the technology community in government. It's actually one of the oldest demographics in government is in the IT community. And I'm not sure we're prepared to take advantage of all those factors and move ourselves to the next level.
I can state firsthand that Stan is always in a funk. That can really not be emphasized enough.
Okay, Will, I want to ask you this question. Have we learned anything from the last year or two, or especially year 2014? Have we learned anything?
I certainly think the industry has learned something, and that is, you know, we have to, on our side, prepare for unpredictability. We can't count on the stability that was a feature of our market for a long time, and so we on our side have to prepare, make projections, and act on those projections in the absence of sometimes much good information.
I think we've learned one other thing, if I can just jump in here, Jim, sorry. I think the other thing we've learned from looking from the outside, and I agree with Will, I think there's a lot of things industry needs to do differently. And the other piece is we have now really seen very clearly this last year a major gulf within government of collaboration between communities, between the acquisition and customer community.
A gulf that's widening?
I think it's widening, and the concern I would have about that is we talk a lot, Ann talks a lot about building industry-government communications and collaboration. We're seeing less and less of that within the government, and in fact we will be releasing later this month a survey that shows that amongst contracting folks that we interviewed, innovation is the next to last priority on their list.
And the first priority?
First priority is get the job done.
To get the job done. Okay. Well, again, we're going to step away. When we come back, I think I'd like to talk about the flow of RFPs that occurred in 2014. Okay? We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine Rogers, and I'm the president of the USO of Metropolitan Washington. I'd like to take the opportunity to tell you about a great holiday program we have that brings cheer and joy to the children of our local service members and their families living in the Washington-Baltimore area. Project USO Elf is a program that gives you the opportunity to be an elf to a military child during the holiday season. These gifts will be made up of toys taken from the personal wish lists of the children of our nation's military heroes. What better time to say thank you to our local service members and their families than during the holiday season? Please help us put smiles on the faces of our military children by serving as an elf this year. Registration is so easy. To learn more about Project USO Elf and other USO Metro holiday programs, visit usometro.org/holiday. Thank you for your support of our troops and their families. And from all of us at the USO of Metropolitan Washington, happy holidays.
Stan Soloway from Professional Services Council. A lot of people in the industry expected that once the government came back to work, once the sequestration had already had run its course or whatever, that the tap of the RFPs that were flowing would increase. And yet many people think that it has not. What are you seeing from your perspective?
What we saw in 2014 were actually two very different spending patterns between the civilian side and the defense side. And I think it was based on lessons they learned in 2013. So the Defense Department, if you remember, in 2013 was fighting against the tide of sequestration, took the position, Secretary Panetta took the position that sequestration's not going to happen. The direction internally was we're going to spend according to plan, we're going to execute our mission. The civilian agencies were sitting back, you could almost sense, not literally but figuratively, sitting back going, we're not so sure what's going to happen. So the first quarter of 2013 was a disaster on the civilian side from a market perspective, rock and rolling on the defense side. Then they reversed because defense kind of got out over its skis. This year what we saw was the civilian side, even with the shutdown in the first quarter, actually had a fairly consistent pattern, and actually in the higher end or mid to higher end of the market, the professional services, technology and so forth, the market actually grew in 2014 slightly and was consistent. The Defense Department was the reverse. Defense had a very, very slow start because they were much more conservative. As Will pointed out, the defense budget, everybody's under pressure, but the defense budget has many more perturbations and many more uncertainties about it. And then finally, mid-second quarter, third quarter, defense started spending, but again, never quite caught up. So we had actually a drop in the market in the Defense Department, although the drop was less than the drop in spending, which is important because it suggests that stability I mentioned. We're seeing two kind of different patterns. And what ultimately it says to me is agency confidence in their budget. Not necessarily the total amount, but confidence in knowing what they've got triggers them being able to act. I mean, it's logical. And the second piece is that the highest priority missions of the government, many of which involve technology, engineering, and other kinds of capabilities, are the areas that are most require the private sector support and engagement, because that's where a lot of the human capital is. Right. And so you tend to see when spend starts heavier, more than private sector involvement than not, because they are the priority missions, and they're going to be the first in line to go. So I think it has to do with confidence in the budget levels.
But it's I understand why you're asking about the number of RFPs, but kind of going back to our earlier conversation, from my perspective, I'm really focused on the outcomes. So are we getting the kind of performance that we need from these RFPs? And for me, that goes to ensuring we have the right competition in the RFPs, and that we're bringing in the new innovative companies, and that for those that are in the marketplace, are they able to drive that innovation?
Yeah, well, but many of the companies have this infrastructure in place that is designed to deal with a certain volume of RFPs, and if they're not there, their jobs are at stake.
Well, what I hear more than the volume.
So it does relate to volume in some way.
It does, but I hear more from the companies. I agree with you that that's a problem. I hear more. It's not just they have planning cycles over how long a procurement should take, when it should be awarded and start, and we're seeing procurement lead times just stretch out ad infinitum, adding time for protests and so forth. But I want to make one other quick point, and this is an area where we have a difference with the administration, and it started several years ago. Using, Ann mentioned this bending of the contract curve a few years ago and the continuing bend. That to me is a measure of nothing. How much we spend on contracting means nothing from a government mission perspective. What matters is we getting innovation, and are we getting efficient delivery of our services regardless of what the method we use? And so to say we pride ourselves on bending the contracting curve, that doesn't tell me anything.
Right. We're saying the same thing.
Same thing?
Sort of.
Okay. Well, Ann, look, how about this? Observation, maybe it's true or false, but the RFPs and the proposals are shrinking. In other words, they're more page limited now than ever. That's what at least we're seeing.
They've gone from 1,000 pages to 999, is what you're saying?
Is that it?
No, I mean, when I talk to industry, what I hear is, and government, is that they're too long. They're too overly prescriptive, that they're too government specific. It's not necessarily the length, but really, are we writing these in such a way that we're allowing companies to be innovative? And in the plan that I recently released, we have a piece in there where we're creating this tool to allow industry, both winning and losing proposers, to give their feedback on specific solicitations. And one of the questions is, did this solicitation allow you to be innovative? Now, we've only piloted this on one solicitation in GSA, but they scored low on that question. That doesn't mean I can't draw any grand conclusions from that one acquisition, but when we start launching this across government, we will understand our pain points better and what is really, the impediments to offering really innovative solutions.
And we've suggested asking that question of every stakeholder involved in a procurement, internal and external, to really do a 360-degree evaluation of procurement process quality.
You think that's something that NDIA would support?
Certainly. I mean, what I hear from our members is really about solicitation quality, and that there's still an issue to be addressed there, I think along the lines of what Stan and Ann have said.
Right, okay. All right, well, once again, we'll step away and we'll be right back. It's no surprise to any of you that social media has impacted virtually every aspect of our personal lives. Sure, you can say there are both pluses and minuses, but this is the world we live in, and absent a move to a deserted island, there's no getting around it. What is surprising, though, is how some in the government contracting community have not yet fully embraced social media as a business strategy, not only to advance your brand, but also to help win and retain business with your federal customers. At Key Solutions, we believe that social media has to be an integral part of your business development plan. We also believe that while this technology is advancing like a high-speed train, you can either jump on board or watch your competition leave you in the dust. If you are a federal contractor looking to integrate a social media strategy into your business, we will be able to help you. Contact us at aockeysolutions.com.
AFCEA has been bringing government and industry together since 1946. By joining AFCEA, you will reach the decision makers and become part of the discussion. You'll increase market visibility, gain market insight, receive discounts on AFCEA member services and events, and manage and engage corporate associates. AFCEA is the association of choice. Join today at www.afcea.org.
Okay, we come to that portion of the show where I always ask the guests for one final takeaway. So, Will, if you could leave the audience with just one message, what would your message be?
I think I would tell people to go back and look at the CSIS annual report on contracting and how disproportionately the sequestration cuts fell on contracting and modernization accounts. You know, we have sequestration. We all agree that it is seriously reducing the budget beneath where it needs to be, and yet there's still a lot of money being spent in the Defense Department. And so the question, I think, going forward is, what are the other accounts that need to be addressed before we go back to the modernization and contracting well?
Okay. And in 30 seconds, why don't you see if you can come up with another perspective here?
From my perspective, we need to simplify the federal contracting space. And I think we can do that through greater collaboration and sharing among industry and government, and in government, to Stan's earlier point. And I think the blueprint that I recently released will help address those points.
Stan.
Well, I was going to say one of the best things of the year happened to be Anne Rung being made administrator.
I was going to say that too.
But I've completely changed my opinion.
That might sound too
but coming out of my funk that she accused me of being in, I guess what I'd say is, on a serious note, is I think that it's become clearer than ever to me that given the unstable world we live in, not just in the budget, but everything around us being unstable, we have to fundamentally rethink how we're developing and deploying our workforce across government and how we're training them.
Okay.
And really start having a serious conversation. What does the future actually look like? Because we are stuck in a past rut that I think is not getting us anywhere.
And we're going to take that as the final word here, okay? Okay, so I hope that today's program helped bring some context and closure to 2014. I'd also like to invite you all to join us next week when we present our third annual look ahead to the coming year, as another outstanding panel joins me to gaze into their crystal balls for a preview of what lies ahead for GovCon in 2015. But for now, I'd like to thank today's outstanding panel for helping us better understand where our industry is as we say goodbye to 2014. First, Will Goodman, the Assistant Vice President for Policy at the National Defense Industrial Association. Will, thank you so much for joining us.
This is my pleasure.
Okay. Next, I want to thank Anne Rung, the new Administrator of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy at the Office of OMB. Thank you, Anne, for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And finally, Stan Soloway, the President and CEO of the Professional Services Council. Stan, as always, we thank you for being here.
My pleasure, Jim. Thank you.
But most importantly, I want to thank you, our viewers, for once again making Government Contracting Weekly a regular part of your learning regimen. Now, on behalf of all my colleagues at Key Solutions, I'm Jim McCarthy, and I'll see you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.